Hi guys, MrRoflWaffles here. There's been a lot of discussion over the last few days about the RNG of the subroutines in Cryo Archive, and a lot of first impressions from people playing the map for the first time. So in this video, I'm kind of going to blend two things together. I'm first and foremost going to basically review Cryo with all my first thoughts, my first impressions, everything that I was reacting to on the live stream from here at Bungie, and also the stuff that I then kind of stewed on a little bit as I continue to play the map over the rest of the weekend. But I'm also going to include within that some discussion of the subroutines conversation, because that's one of my biggest gripes, I would say, with the map and with the rollout of it, and so I figured it would be pertinent to this video. So we'll start off, essentially, with everything I'm not really a fan of in Cryo Archive, and then we'll move into everything that I love about Cryo, of which there is a lot. Like, I really do love this map, and so we're gonna present the bad, and then we're gonna present the good. So let's talk subroutines. The story, for those of you that are not up to date and familiar with what's happened, especially on the official Bungie stream, is that we got into Cryo and people started trying to solve vaults. There are 6 vaults that needed to be solved before you could then go ahead and do Vault 7, and the Vault 7 process is the one where you end up fighting the boss, and that's kind of the main objective of you doing all that stuff in the first place. So you're working through all the vaults, you need keys for the vaults, and then when you use a key and get into the vault and solve its puzzle, you then have a chance to get a subroutine that you have to exfil with. And your completion of the vault only counts if you successfully exfil with that subroutine. The problem is that the subroutines are not always there. Sometimes you'll go through the whole vault process, you'll look at the table, and there'll be no subroutine inside. It'll just be a vault with loot, but not with the specific thing that you're looking for. And I think that on the day of the sort of solving of all of this, it led to some really awkward situations where, for example, Snazzy's team had no red key, which was the key for Vault 6. They got really lucky and they got a red key. They successfully solved the vault, and then there was no subroutine inside. And those red keys are so rare that it meant that they were basically out for the rest of the solve. They could not participate in the rest of the solve, despite the fact that they were the furthest ahead at that point, and they were looking like they were going to be the first team to get to compiler. They were just removed from the equation purely because of bad luck with the subroutine. Then we saw other teams, like Bog's team, for example, who had a really dreadful time in their first several hours. They were getting basically steamrolled for their first couple of runs, losing tons of loot, but then they started doing their vaults, and out of 7 vault runs, they got 6 subroutines. So they only missed a subroutine once, and the RNG worked in their favor every other time. And that's not, to be clear, to discredit Bog in any way. That's just to say there's a clear discrepancy here where some teams were having to do vaults over and over again just to get the subroutine, and others were completely fine, more or less. And I think this is an unfortunate kind of outcome at the best of times, right? But it's even more unfortunate in the context of the fact that so many of the Destiny community and Destiny raiding community were the ones pushing the furthest ahead in this hunt. I mean, we saw Tyrax obviously with the world first, but we also saw Bog's team and Snazzy's team, and we saw Ty, and we saw all these different people that were making so much progress, and they come from a game in Destiny 2 where that nature of RNG is just not present in that way. It's actually a much more controlled environment. And so I think that exacerbated the problem a little bit, because optically it was in contrast to what we know from Destiny history. And I just don't like the design choice. And I think that it's a really important thing for us to give clear feedback about now, because left untouched, I fear that this is something that would then seep into and permeate future map releases for Marathon. Like, should there be another Marathon ship map, for instance, sometime in the future, in 6 months or in a year or whenever, and it's a similar puzzle to Cryo, like it's actually an endgame pinnacle map as opposed to another map that's meant to be played more casually or what have you, I worry that they would go, okay, well, we established some norms in Cryo Archive that we do this kind of RNG, and so we're going to bring it back. And I think that just really needs to not happen. I think that is essential, that we make that extremely clear now. The good news is that Joe Ziegler has already responded to all of this, which is kind of crazy. Like, he's been so on the ball with the communications, and that's very promising. And he's said that the team is going to be evaluating this stuff and continuing to iterate as well. So by no means is this sort of a dark mark for Cryo that will be permanent, and by no means is this like an existential threat for the map itself. But I just want to make it abundantly clear and give the feedback here in my block of negatives for this video. That is probably my biggest problem with the map. I think that you take that away, the map net, all things considered, is really phenomenal, but RNG just stinks. And I hate this in other games too, right? It's not just in Marathon. I hate it in Zombies, right? In COD Zombies, I'm so used to loading into a Zombies Easter egg and having to find random part spawns, and I find that annoying, right? Sometimes there's just a part spawn you happen to have in your game that no one's figured out yet, and meanwhile other people have a really easy part spawn to find, and it's just frustrating. And that's minimal. Like, that's actually kind of a tiny thing in comparison to this, where people were putting 100 hours into the game just to get one red key. Like, in my first 100 hours, I didn't get a red key drop. And so to go through all of that work and then use the key and do everything right and just not get the subroutine in the vault is crazy. Like, doesn't make any sense to me. So I think the subroutines need to change. I also think there are one or two, and there's not many of these, and this is a very, very minor thing, but there are one or two elements of the map that feel a little inconsistent and weird. Some of this is RNG. Some of this may come down to my lack of understanding in certain areas, but like I said, this is partly first impressions. And some of it might just be that there are some kind of unusual design decisions present. So for example, there are different spawns around the map, right? And depending on which POI you spawn into, you might have a terminal that you can access, or you might have multiple terminals that you can access, and each of those terminals gives you 3 pips of security clearance. Now that's fine. The problem, in my view, is that sometimes you load in and you have abundant terminals. Other times you load in, and it feels like it's nearly impossible to get the security clearance that you need to be able to proceed through the map in the way that you want to do so. And I think this is maybe an intentional choice, because it means that you have some dynamic element to the way you play the map. You can't just do it the exact same way every single time. And I think that there are similar systems on Outpost, for example, but the difference is that in Outpost, even though there are randomized spawns, it still feels like with a little bit of flex, I can achieve what I want to achieve nearly instantaneously in Outpost, as long as I pathfind in the right direction, for instance, right? Whereas in Cryo, it feels like if you don't get the terminal that you're looking for example, you are just kind of screwed in doing that path. You kind of just have to play the map completely differently from that point on. It takes you an extra 5 whole minutes to catch back up. And again, maybe this is just my lack of map knowledge, but I'm not so sure about that as a design choice. I feel like there is an inconsistency element there, which I'm not sure I am particularly keen on. And that goes for the security tags themselves as well as the terminals. It's not just a terminals thing. I know that the terminals are meant to be very consistent, where you always have one in that next room after you open up that initial space. But yeah, it just feels like sometimes you get really sort of slingshotted forwards, and that does give you quite a significant advantage over other teams. And then other times you just don't get that opportunity. I don't know. Leave your thoughts on that one in the comments below. There's also some weirdness with the bot spawns when you trip laser wires. So the way this works in the map is there are these green laser tripwires around the place, and if you trip one, it sort of locks you into a room and you have to do a little hack to get out, and it also means you need to do an OS reboot and stuff like that. And that sounds fine, but sometimes you trip those wires and they spawn bots, and other times you trip the wires and they don't. And I can't figure out what the reasoning is behind that. I just have got experience of both things happening. And it means that if you use the tripwires to farm security tags when you're in a scenario where you just don't have any tags, for example, then you're left kind of wondering, am I going to get a bot spawn here? Am I not? Am I just wasting my time? Am I just doing this for no reason? And I think that as a player loop, like as part of the gameplay loop, doesn't feel great. It doesn't feel great to sort of use your knowledge of the map to say I'm going to have like a 50% chance of bot spawning in here, and otherwise I'm just like wasting my time doing nothing. And it's very uninteresting when that nothing happens as well. It's not like you are doing some kind of interesting, fun puzzle or something to remove the hack. You're just wasting time, and you're wasting an OS reboot, and it does nothing for you, and it doesn't move the game forward in any meaningful way. So I feel like there's either a mechanic there that I'm missing, which is totally possible, or I'm just not really a fan of the fact that it seems like it's random? Maybe. Now next, for things I don't like, this one's mixed because it's actually also something that I do like. I just hate it because it's so hard, but I also love it because that challenge is something that I look forward to overcoming. And it's the exfils. And I don't fully know yet whether I think that they are tuned in a way that I like. I think that this is going to take some more time for me to really figure out. But the way the exfils work in the map is you have to find a station to activate the exfil, and then when that happens, you can run across the map to find the exfil over the course of 3 minutes. If you miss those 3 minutes, you're cooked. And also, other players can take your exfil, and also you then have a final exfil, but it doesn't tell you where the final exfil is, and so you just have to find it. All these decisions coming together mean that there are lots of opportunities for you to just be really frustrated with the map. For instance, I've had scenarios where I've tried to take my exfil that I've called in, and then another team just takes it, but then they don't take it, they just get on it and get off it and get on it and get off it and waste time. And that's meant that I've not been able to call in another exfil because I already have the exfil up, or at least it hasn't seemed like I've been able to do that because my UI already has the timer of the one exfil there. And so I've been in this sort of weird game readability sort of issue space where I don't know what I can or can't do because this other team is messing with the thing. And you could argue that that's actually a good thing and that's cool, but for me, the problem wasn't the dynamic nature of it. The problem was that I felt the game did lose readability as a result. And I think that legibility is really important at all times in a game like this. And when the exfil's UI and the transition between regular exfil and final exfil UI is something that I think could do with a little bit of polishing, I think that there's room for those exfils in Cryo to be really, really frustrating, to be honest. I also think that the decision for final to only give you 60 seconds seems pretty crazy, and maybe that's just because they want it to be extremely punishing if you don't make it out. And if that's the case, I guess fair enough, right? Like, I do like the challenge of it, and I'll talk about that once we get to the what I like section of the video. But yeah, it seems tuned in a pretty gnarly way right now, and because the map is such a labyrinth, there's also so many scenarios where the exfil marker is on your level and you don't realize you have to go up and then down and then up to get to it, or something along those lines, and it leads to you getting stuck, and that just feels really, really annoying. Now again, I think there's room to say that that's actually good design and the map should be punishing, but it is a big source of frustration. It's something I've really observed in the last 72 hours, so figured I should mention it. And speaking of which, I'm torn on some of the pathing decisions. There are certain areas, like for example, when you are in the middle left part of the map and you're trying to go to the top left part of the map, so you're in the west area and you're trying to go northwest, there are a load of shipping containers there, and the obvious path is that you run into those shipping containers, but then they're all dead ends in that area and you have to find some kind of workaround that I still don't even know where it is. And there are countless examples of that in the space. Like, there are so many of them. And on the one hand, I like that, and we'll talk about that in the what I like section of the video, but it is also a massive source of frustration, and it's something where I don't know if the map would be worse if it was better signposted. I don't know. It might mean that the skill ceiling is maybe lower, maybe, but I'm not sure if the way that I want to be outplayed by teams is them remembering that the counterintuitive way to climb over a box to go through a door is the way forward to an exfil. Like, I don't know. There's elements of that I really love, and I will talk about that later in the video, but there are other elements of it which I think I question whether they could be more legible for the player, and the player could understand the flow better, and there could be better signposting in the map as to, like, where is a staircase? Okay, well, like, you can use a decal on the wall to show where the staircase is, and things like that. I question whether the map would be worse if they added more indications like that as to how to sort of traverse the space. I don't know. I'm not sure. My gut says TBD, honestly. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that one as well. Now, another thing that I don't dislike, but I did find unfortunate about my first weekend of Cryo was it felt unusually like there weren't a lot of opportunities for the music in the game to really wow me. I think that this is something that Marathon just maybe struggles with a little bit, and that's that you're in a squad all of the time in Cryo. There's no solos, right? There's no rook runs. And so I'm talking with my teammates 24/7. We are constantly communicating. And that means that there's a lot of talking over the game happening. And granted, we're listening for footsteps and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we are also just yapping. And I wonder if there could have been certain areas of the map or certain events in the map where the music could have been layered in an interesting way that could have surfaced that music to me better. For example, I wonder if in the ascent to the boss, once you are doing the little jumpy puzzle thing and running through those corridors with the ticks, I wonder if that could have been an opportunity to dynamically bring some music in a way that really felt epic and really sort of added to the stakes of things. And I didn't really experience that, or at least I didn't notice it in my compiler run or in the runs that I was watching. And granted, the runs I was watching could have been just that they had music volume turned off, but I think the music of this game is so good. It is one of its strongest points, and I was sort of hopeful that Cryo might have a similar strong musical offering that would really resonate with me and stay with me. Code Race is a phenomenal track, but I was crossing my fingers that there'd be a Cryo Code Race, a Cryo Race, a something, and it didn't feel like that was there, or it didn't feel like I found that at least, and that is maybe a little bit of a missed opportunity. Then, for my final piece of critique here, I do wonder if the boss fight could have been more interesting. I do wonder. I like the boss fight. I think the compiler does aura farm quite well. I think that the aesthetics of the space and the reds in contrast with the greens look good. I just wonder if bees and terminals are a little basic. And I think that some people will strongly disagree with that, because they'll see those things and they'll think, well, this shouldn't be Destiny, and it isn't Destiny. It's an extraction shooter, for goodness sake. And it's already really difficult because the compiler bees do so much damage. So, like, what are you talking about? But I'm so used to PvE experiences, whether it's zombies, whether it's Destiny, whether it's other games. And looking at this fight in the context of all of those games in the wider industry, it just feels to me like there could have been more to do. There could have been more of an emphasis on having the player stand in certain places at certain times, or there could have been more multitasking. There could have been more design elements, actually, that would have made it more justified as to why you have to play Cryo in a trio as well. Like, I really could see a world where you have to sort of do multiple things simultaneously, or you have to have some kind of secondary mechanic that's ongoing while you're managing the primary mechanic of just hitting terminals while you're shooting bees. Like, there could have been one other layer there, I feel like, that might have been interesting and might have meant that there would be things in the fight to learn. As it stands, I don't know if there's a huge amount to learn in the fight. And I think that that's maybe a missed opportunity, because that could have shown the team really flexing their muscles to set precedents also for the future. And instead, the boss kind of falls over. Now, granted, maybe that's because there's no contest weekend in this game, right? And as far as we know, there isn't ever going to be a contest mode in this game. So they kind of have to make it fall over because it's a normal difficulty boss. So of course it falls over. But contest is so celebrated for a reason. And I don't know. I just feel like there could have been slightly more to that than there was. And it could have been really compelling as a result. And maybe they could have made cool decisions like encouraging you to team up with other players in Raid, but then forcing you to make different decisions about if you do team up with them, who gets the, like, I don't know, something like that. But it felt like it was just fairly simple in the end. So I have some criticism of the map, as you've just heard. However, I love this thing. I really love it. I think it's the best extraction shooter map I've ever played. I think that the way it blends the tension of the rest of the game with the almost horror elements of just the map itself, the fear that you have moving around, the anticipation of every gunfight, of every little scritchy scratch you hear from behind a wall that could indicate either there's a player back there or maybe it's just a bot walking around. It's phenomenal in that regard. So let's start with the tension. I think that Perimeter and Dire Marsh were a great place for this game to begin. I think that Perimeter does its job very well. I understand people that find that Dire is a little bit too heavy on third-partying, but honestly, I think that in the suite of maps available in this game, I think it serves its purpose. There isn't another map like Dire Marsh. I don't think you can really point to another map and say, well, they already did that with X. Dire Marsh fills a space in the game. Outpost then came out a day later, and Outpost was a really brilliant map for introducing you to puzzle-style mechanics, while also giving you plenty of opportunities to be in crazy gunfights, to be third-partied also, but to get slightly better loot. And I think that what Cryo does so well is it makes those other maps look like a walk in the park, or maybe inversely, it takes the foundations that those other maps laid, and it says, this is the natural conclusion here. This is the sweatbox where you're going to get in there and you are going to be fearing for your life at every single second. You have to play sweaty. You can't just casually roam around like you can on Outpost, as well as Dire Marsh and Perimeter. Like, it's not like Outpost already fulfilled those criteria of being a puzzly map where there's also complete tension at every second. Outpost actually ends up being quite relaxed in a lot of areas, in my experience, especially due to the fact that there are fewer teams. It's not the case on Cryo. Cryo is just, it's special because the tension is so great, and it's special also because the stakes are so high. The 5k minimum gear bounty is such a good feature for this map. It's annoying as hell. It's frustrating to have to build out a loadout and lose it over and over again and not be able to just run in with a sponsor kit, but it changes the game completely. And there have been too many times where I've been playing Outpost and I've been going in there with a load of loot, trying to jack loot from other loaded teams, and I just fight 3 teams that all have grey gear, and it's just really unfortunate, and it kind of devalues and diminishes the experience of Outpost like a little bit, I would say, when that happens to you over and over again, and you're putting things on the line and they're not, and they don't feel penalized really for doing that. But Cryo fixes that. You are always putting something on the line. You get such good loot immediately that it's so worthwhile to take those other enemy teams down, even if they do load in with just the minimum value of 5k, because you are inevitably going to get a load of good stuff from them, and you're going to get security clearance. And in Outpost, taking another team down and getting like a yellow keycard or something was good. Like, that was very good. That's a very useful thing to be able to do. It's so much more significant in Cryo because the extra security tags that you get becomes such an interesting part of the way you play the map. I mean, even being mid-team fight and looting a body of a down that you can kind of secure for your team, taking their security tags and making it so that the other team can't open doors, and so you can push them and they can't run away. Like, that's cinema. That's an incredible piece of design that I adore. And it all comes down to the stakes and the forcing functions in place to maintain those stakes through the map. I love those features. And on a related note, honestly, the dynamic nature of the fights in Cryo are also just a joy to behold. There are certain hot zones of the map, right? And this happens in all maps. Like on Perimeter, it's probably Overflow. On Diamarsh, it's probably Algae. Although, to be honest, it's also Bio sometimes. It's also Maintenance. Dire's a tough map. There's a lot of chaos everywhere, right? Then on Outpost, I mean, obviously everybody is fighting over command of the pinwheel. That often means that people are fighting over flight control initially, but then they end up fighting just in the wheel in the various wings. And that happens every single time I play the map. But in Cryo, it's a little different because it's not like there's one zone that is the zone for fights other than control in the middle, which works very well. But there are other objectives in other areas, in the vaults, and then also in the secret hatch, for example. And those mean that, similar to how you might be doing a contract on Diamarsh and it might take you from Bio to Quarantine or something, and that might therefore mean that you run into other players doing the same thing, and that creates dynamic events in your game. I think the fact that there are so many vaults spread over all the POIs in Cryo, and there is the secret hatch in the middle, and you need to do things in the middle to like fill up your cryo coolant and stuff like that, and you've got the labs area, and you've got the upstairs area of control, the panopticon, right? All of these things being interwoven means you end up with a different match every single time you play it, and that doesn't happen for me in some of the other maps. Like, I've done so many Outpost runs that have actually ultimately been the same thing. I wipe all the teams on the map by fighting at flight control, and then I just clear command, and I'm done. I'm finished, right? Whereas in Cryo, so far at least, every single run has been different. And that's despite the fact that yesterday I had 3 or 4 runs in a row at the same spawn, and every single one of the matches went a different way. And it's because there is just so much pulling you in so many different directions in different runs that you play. And I love that. And I think that extraction shooters are made or broken by how well they can introduce dynamic pathing to the player and suggest choices to them that they then take and that lead to them having new experiences again and again and again that do not get old. That is a fundamental tenet of these games, and Cryo nails it in a way that I've never seen on a map in an extraction shooter before. I just haven't seen it. I've seen little things, right? I've seen stuff in Delta Force. I've seen stuff in Arc where you play a variation of the map and it's like, okay, right now there's a storm, or right now the weather's different, or right now there's an event where a rocket has crashed into this dam and so the dam has been blown open, and these things happen, right? These ideas of these dynamic events, these ideas of these dynamic spawns of things. But some of the stuff in Cryo, man, it just takes it to the next level in a way that I have really loved so far. Now, I mentioned I would come back to exfils. I think on the one hand, I hate those damn things. On the other hand, though, I really love the fact that Bungie is not shying away from challenge in this map. And so on the topic of exfils and the topic of pathing and routing through the space, I adore the fact that they don't hold your hand. And it annoys the hell out of me. Don't get me wrong. I find it just as frustrating as I'm sure you guys do. I don't have like a Bungie map being like, oh, this is how you get through this space, and we're only giving it to a content creator, lol. Like, that does not exist. I got thrown into the meat grinder just like you guys did, and it's been horrible in certain areas. Like, I've had multiple exfils, sometimes with subroutines in my backpack, where I've died and lost everything just because I can't figure out where the frickin' staircase is. But there's a big part of me that's like, you know what? That's amazing that Bungie knew that would happen and they still full sent it because they know this map is Endgame. This isn't Perimeter. This isn't even Dire Marsh, right? We've had those maps. We then had a little bit more of a confusing layout in some areas on Outpost, but I thought Outpost was fairly mazy until I played Cryo, and now I look back at it and I'm like, Outpost is a cakewalk. This map is genuinely a labyrinth, and that takes some confidence from the dev team. That takes a bold approach. That takes a willingness to say, this is going to focus test badly in certain areas because Joe Smith, the general marathon player, John Marathon, whoever it might be, is going to get into that space and be lost, and the world is not going to help them. Like, in an era of yellow paint on ledges, Bungie said, how about we take away the yellow paint and we hide the ledge behind 15 other staircases and you have to figure out which one's the right one. Like, that is Cryo in a nutshell. And I love that confidence, and it makes me love the frustrating elements. And I guess the big thing also about Cryo is there's a lot of good loot. And I love the fact that it's as juiced as it is. And I think, honestly, also, actually, we should probably talk a little bit about the timing of Cryo here, because there was the controversy in the sort of day or two leading up to the launch of the map, where they said it's going to be weekends only. And everyone was like, that stinks. I work weekends. I can't play it on weekends. Why? So there was that conversation. And Joe Ziegler came out and said, we're open to iterating on this, like, keep the feedback coming, etc., right? So great to have a response from Joe so fast. But what I've now seen is people play the map and they go, oh, yeah, I actually get it. I get why it's weekends only. And I've seen Shroud talk about this on stream, and Shroud praise it and be like, it's so awesome that you have this loop where during the week you build up your loadout, your inventory, your vault, so that you have everything you need for Cryo and you earn keys for Cryo. And then you go into Cryo on the weekend, you burn through all your keys trying to get your objectives done. And if you don't make it during the weekend, you come back in the next week. That's a really cool loop, is what he said. And I've seen so many countless people saying since Cryo's come out, oh my goodness, yeah, actually, because the loot is so juicy, I think that if Cryo was around 24/7, it's the only thing people would play, and it's therefore the only thing people would do for a month, and maybe then 2 months, and then they would just be burned out on the game. And when we're getting a new map in Season 2 in Night Marsh, but it's not really a new map, it's just a version of an old map, I think that people having played Cryo only for 2 straight months or 3 straight months would be an existential threat to Marathon. And in a world where I think many of us really want there to be years more Marathon content because we're all loving the game so much, there need to be some kind of ways that the game incentivizes you and forces you to play some of those other experiences and to have a continuously dynamic time with the game. And a weekend gate is one of the ways that they can do that. Now, I do think that there should be opportunities to, for example, have like a Cryo Wednesday where it's like, okay, runners, next week we're going to do something different and we're going to invert things. Cryo is going to be open Monday through Friday, and then we're not going to have it open on the weekend, for example. Like, trying out something like that could be really cool, and there's no reason not to do that, right? I think that they should play around with things in that kind of way. Or maybe they should just have 1 week where it is open for the whole week, but then they go back to weekends only. Or maybe there's something where it's like, I don't know, the community can unlock something in the game that triggers it to open for a little bit of an extra period or something. I don't know. But I think I am of the opinion that carte blanche open 24/7 might not be the right idea here. And that's why so many other extraction shooters have spaces which are key card gated, right? That is why. Like, Cryo has the issue of the fact that it's also end of the end game, so you need higher player population for it to make sense and for it to work. And in order to do that, you need to constrain the player base's playtime, and so a weekend makes more sense there. But yeah, also a lot of the time these things are keycard gated and Cryo is not. And so it's like, okay, well, in lieu of that, what other feature are we going to have to make sure that there's some kind of Endgame feel here, of Pinnacle feel here, and I think that the time gate does make more sense as a result of that. I don't think it's a perfect solution right now, but I do get it more, and that's the same sentiment that I've seen shared elsewhere. So those overall are my first impressions of Cryo Archive. Please let me know in the comment section if you agree or disagree with any of this. Keep the feedback coming. I'm going to try really hard to get like an interview with Bungie lined up at some point in the next couple of weeks so that we can talk about some of these things and talk about how they're making decisions internally to address some of this stuff and to move forward and to iterate. Don't know if it's going to be able to happen or not, but it's something that is definitely on my agenda because a lot of you guys have asked me for it since I came out here to Bungie. So I'll do my best, but in the meantime, just keep the feedback coming in the comments of my videos. I'll keep track of that, and then should the opportunity arise, I will make the most of it. So thanks for watching. Drop a like on the video if you've enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.